Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
Um, we have, going along with the series of lectures, and we've covered certain topics, quite important areas, prominent areas, I would say. And today is an equivalent prominent area that we are going to discuss, a timely area as well, um, which I was engaged relevant to this for some time now. That is on countering of financing of terrorism and anti-money laundering. I've been working on this both locally and internationally for about 17 years now. Um, but uh, I'm not that satisfied with the current regime. uh, I'm not referring to any particular political party or anything. What I'm basically saying is the status in this country, not only in this country, which we see this type of issues in all these South Asian to um, South American areas and even in Europe as well. We will talk about these matters. The only issue is it's all talks but no works kind of a thing. See, let's begin this. Then you will have an understanding at the end of this session what this is all about, right? I presume all of you all can see my slides, right? Right. So we'll start. So anti-money laundering and countering of terrorism financing. We are going to discuss basically on the law governing these two matters: anti-money laundering and countering of financing of terrorism in Sri Lanka. Certain things that we are going to discuss. I hope you all can see this um, pictorial graph, right? As to what is money laundering is all about, right? Like I said, I started off my on the job training on money laundering in the year 2004. Yeah, it's been 17 years now, and from that day onwards, I've been working with many enforcement authorities, many financial institutions, both local as well as international, as to the best practices, what we can do about this. Hands-on experience matters in the front line, and we were successful in reporting certain suspicious activities, etc. And certain of them we got to know later on have had successful convictions, etc., etc. But before going into that level, we'll first see what is money laundering. Money laundering, this is again the framework of money laundering was again in Sri Lanka enacted about 14 years ago in 2006, 14 to 15 years. But what have we done? Have we come? Have we progressed on those matters? The answer to that question is yes. What has been the legal framework then, and what has been the awareness of the public in comparison is satisfactory. We need to admit that. Money laundering, like the plain English terms meaning of the term laundering, is making something clean. You you give your clothes to the laundry to dirty clothes. We'll use this raw words, right? To clean them so that you can wear it and as good as new, right? Ironed and everything, so that when you are wearing the laundered clothes, right? After all that process, no one would know sometimes whether it has been dirty or the fact that they have been used before. No. So the same principle applies to money laundering. In the most simplest of terms, you can say washing of the money. We are not talking about the literal washing. We are talking about washing or giving a new face to the money or the wealth that may have been illegally sourced, and giving it such a recognition in the financial world to show that the source of such illegal gotten money is actually from legal sources, right? We will see why we are doing this. What is this? What's so important about this, etc. Right. So, for the purpose of studies and identification, we categorize this into three levels, three stages, right? First, we call it the placement, right? When just tell me when when my slide is on, can you all see me?
Yes, sir. Can see.
Oh, okay, great. Placement of the money is the first stage of this money laundering process. Those who think knows about this, listen very carefully. This is again, I'm sure your financial institutions are giving you all sufficient training, and for all the others, rest of the others as well, just pay attention to see the rationale behind this, right? It's very important because it took me quite a period of time just to get the core principles into the head, right? Back then there was no legal framework, so to speak, in Sri Lanka with related to or regarding money laundering. Now the first stage, as I said, see, this is purely for educational purposes. We have categorized, divided that into three stages. First one is placement. What is placement? We are talking about placing this money in the financial sector, financial framework, I would say. That is, you have dirty money now. Say, for an example, you have dirty clothes. What do? You need to clean it. So when you need to clean it, the stages of laundry, you first go and place or hand it over to the laundry. So the laundry here is, well, I'll take a very direct example, is a financial institution, right? We'll go into detail in a moment. We'll take a bank. So how do you get illegal money? Money which is illegal, how do you source this? Give me examples. Put them down in the chat box also. How do you first we are discussing about the stages of money laundering. Of getting this into the system. How do you place money in the sorry, not place money. How do you source illegal money? What brings to your mind when it's ill-gotten money? How do you source them? How do you earn?
Drugs business.
Drugs business, yes, by selling drugs, etc.
Smuggling.
Smuggling of what? Drugs?
Persons.
Yeah. Smuggling of people, drugs. What else? I want this discussion because
Joining in the terrorism or terrorist activities.
yes. What else? Unauthorized deals. Achala,
A pyramid?
pyramid. Yeah. Unauthorized. Like that. What else? Be casual in this conversation. Objective is to learn. Weapon business. Okay. What else? Is it so hard to think of ill-gotten money? How people source ill-gotten money insofar as this is concerned? Ill-gotten money basically is the money that not should not be supposedly be your money, right? Where you don't have a legal legal ownership on the money. On the face of it may be that you are the owner, but then again, when you look at the
Activities
record,
in underworld.
huh? Pardon? Lanani, could you repeat your answer? Yes, right. You all type it along. We will continue. Then we'll discuss one by one.
Activities in underworld, and underworld, like they kill people for money, like that.
Yeah, the criminal activities, all these contracts for illegal matters, etc. All this. Then drugs you mentioned. Then what about tax fraud? Then what about fraud per se? Then misappropriation. ඒ කියන්නේ මුදල් අපහරණය කිරීම. Then illegal commissions. Yes, Achala. Right, so we will we will go through so many examples along the discussion.
Bribes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Bribe you may get from someone else. See, it's an offense not only accepting a bribe, even soliciting a bribe is an offense, right? So the list goes on in its sad story for me to say that Sri Lankans like you and I have so much what do you call experience in these dirty activities which we see from the news, and what we encounter in our day-to-day lives as well, which is again as a result of which the country is here where it is now, right? That is nowhere. Secondly, it's a sad story. Secondly, we will go along. So you place this money, let's say for easiness of explanation, in a bank. You go and make a cash deposit. So if you got it through cash, you make the cash deposit, right? Integration into the financial system. Once you deposit it in cash, then there will be your questions of source of funds. Cash is untraceable, then you don't know what the source of funds. Then again, it's not that much of a acceptable source of income. So what they do is they need to have what you call a process where you mask where you try to hide where the actual source is from. How can you do it? You can do X number of transactions. You make that particular cash be subject to X number of transactions. Maybe you can remit it out, wire transfers to somebody else, and then get it back. or invest in certain things, right? Transfer between various onshore and offshore, maybe outside also, right? Not in this country, but outside also. Then integrate it in the system, financial system, by purchasing so many things, lands and etc. Now, if, let's say, think like a criminal in this, if you get exorbitant amount of money and you've been asked to give you've been asked the or I won't say it's the chance, you've been tasked with cleaning that. How do you integrate it to the system according to this example? What type of things you would do to disguise the origin of the money? What would you do?
Invest in share market.
Invest it in share market. Good. What else? So you invest it in share market, and then you basically buy shares of other companies, maybe blue chip companies, and then after some time you sell it in the share market, and credit the proceeds into your bank account as source of funds is investments. You dispose the funds, disposed of the funds which you earn from selling of shares. What else?
Buying
Purchase of land.
jewelries and
Buying jewelries, high value transactions, jewelries, and after that, you can do anything with it. You can either wear it, or you can, pawn it, or you can hire it, you can sell it, and then sale of jewelry items. Somebody else wanted to say something.
Purchasing of land.
Lands, that's the biggest, or that comes top of the list in all these types of transactions, high value transactions. You invest it in land everywhere. This is a universal thing. Yeah, it's not only in Sri Lanka. The first preference would be to invest that in lands, because once you do that, it's quite hard to trace the origin. Good. So you do that, and after some time you dispose of the property, the land, or maybe the jewelry, or whatever you just mentioned, and then you integrate it back again to the system, right? And then the source of funds are clear insofar as the bank and the authorities are concerned. It's sale of assets, sale of this, or that, investments, whatever, right? But financial systems are more vulnerable. We say the nature of the service and products offered by the financial sector, namely managing, controlling, possessing money and property belonging to others. The difference, or that concern comes, like the financial institutions, the bankers, they deal with money. Whose money? Other people's money, right? So they become more vulnerable to the outside money launderers, because they wouldn't know for sure it's not their money, it's other people's money. They would know where it's come from, right? Antiques, car dealerships, like you correctly said. Now, why? Before talking about this, why do you think this whole discussion about money laundering is important? Why do they say it's bad? Why do you say it's bad? It's been accounted back in 2000. This data is quite, some relatively outdated. In 2015, around or so, the amount of this industry in money laundering in the world is valued at over $1 trillion. It's a hell of a lot of money, right? So, as a result of money laundering, all the circumstantial businesses, they thrive because they know that they can launder and they can use this money. Example, human trafficking, right? That's illegal. right? Illegal betting, then illegal, the drugs mafia and the trade. I wouldn't call that a mafia, so to speak. End of the day, if you want to control it, you can control it. The drug trade, illegal the narcotics. So you sell these substances for, in a sense, the end users are not the the real culprits, right? The people who are sourcing the production, manufacturing, supply chain, delivery, and not the street vendors, street level guys, but the distributors. They earn immense, massive amounts of money out of this at the expense of the end user, and launder them. So, if not for all these curtailing methods of laundering money, one way of stopping them is to apprehend them from the neck physically. Second thing is drying up their resources. How to dry up their resources is by strengthening the legal framework and the structure in controlling their proceeds. It's like, what's the use of this? Think about it, right? Let's just think about for a moment. Let's say you have $1 million, $1 million in your hand, right? All $1 million. Somebody asks you to keep it with you. No need to return cash, right? $1 million cash. So if there is no legal framework, what can you do? You can easily, let's say it's a ill-gotten money, even for the launderer, easily use it. No questions asked, lavish lifestyles, this, that, and the other. But if the legal framework was so strengthened that nobody accepts cash, even let's assume you go to a restaurant, dining, you try to pay by cash, they say, no, sir, very sorry, card payments only. You might think this is quite, unusual in this time, we are coming from in Sri Lanka, but in the Europe, it's the other way around, right? Here we prefer cash. We prefer cash. I don't know, people prefer so cash, physical cash. I don't know why, right? It's just a figurative statement. I don't know why. I know why. Secondly, what would be the use of that cash if you can't use it? What's the value of that cash? It may be 1 million, 2, 3, $10 million. If you can't just go and buy what you want over a counter, what's the use of that? So that is the exact objective in strengthening this anti-money laundering laws, right? This is a very good way of, rather than you have to do that, apprehending them by physically, dry up their resources, dry up their sources, everything, financial system. If they can't use what they earn, it's a mitigatory factor. Now, financial task force, there is something called financial task force. In this context, it's more, I'm used to say FATF, but, some people will say FATF, whatever, but, I'd rather not use that. It's Financial Action Task Force, so, formed by the G7 countries in 1989. Just imagine 1989, it's about 34 years old, right? 34 years old. It's a policy-making body for development, promotion of policies, both at national and international levels, to combat money laundering and terrorist finance. All these years, right? It's been there, 34 years is over 3 decades. But unfortunately, Sri Lanka passed legislation with regard to money laundering only in the year 2006. Now, initially, they gave 40 recommendations for all countries and then member countries with regard to money laundering and their money laundering, anti-money laundering legal framework. With regard to the legal system, measures to be taken by the reporting institutions, the institutional framework, and the international cooperation between these institutions, because that is equally important. Otherwise, then you are going to be in your own individual silos. That's not recommended. So, in addition to these 40 recommendations, there is a, you just Google it, there's this 40 recommendations. In addition to that, then they published another 9 recommendations, and it's been effective since then. And all the member countries, right, and all other countries will have to adhere to this. See, one piece of advice I'm telling you. Yes, physically we are in an island. Physically, literally, we are in an island. But that's fine to have or live in an island. But it is not fine to mentally live in an island, because you can't. You are in a global village, right? You can't say, we are an independent country and, sovereignty is there. That's all fine, right? However, if you want to coexist with other countries, where you should have, for you to survive, you have to coexist with other countries, unless you have to produce from the needle to the most sophisticated things on earth in that country itself. Otherwise, it's not that easy to survive. You have to coexist. One thing that encourages that is, we are all in this together. So if you are all in this together, you can't say, we have to do this. We cannot, agree to what you all are saying. For an example, there is a limit and an extent when you are. One thing is, we are a member country of the United Nations, right? And we have signed certain protocols, we have signed and ratified certain things, etc. And on this as well, we have, accepted, yes, we will abide by these universal principles, that is for the betterment, right? The Human Rights Convention, back then they signed after the Holocaust of the Second World War. That is for the sake of every member of this planet, not only for humans, for everyone, right? So, similarly, if these measures, recommendations, 40+9, are being promulgated by these international bodies, we have to follow. If not, we will be downgraded. That is a big thing. We don't understand, or we seem to don't understand the gravity of that, right? At least this is what I see, right? One thing is, we are not even close of challenging those decisions with whatever that is left in the country, right? Right? What do we have in terms of exports in relation to the other countries, right? At least to exert some pressure on them. Not much. Now, in line with the new FATF recommendations, right? Sri Lanka was conducted in the year 2014 and 15. Now, this legal framework has been changed from time to time about once after 2006, right? The report was adopted in the 18th annual plenary of this, whatever you can see that in this, and it evaluated the country's compliance, right, with the report, as against the report. So they give recommendations, and then they see, and then they conduct an audit, and then they see whether it's satisfactory or not. Basically, that is what it is. And what they instill and inculcate is there should be a high level of commitment from the top, the political commitment of that country to implement the legal, regulatory, and the operational reforms required by the action plan, right? So Sri Lanka is coming under APG-RRG, that is Asia Pacific Regional Review Group. Of course, you are talking about global context. So they carried out the review 2016. This ICRG, you call it. 80 countries, over 80 countries were reviewed, and of 49 of them, they made certain reforms of their money laundering, anti-money laundering legislative framework, and the weaknesses that they came across in our systems, and asked us to work on them, and we were placed on monitoring stage, and we were put into the grey list, they said, in monitoring post reviewing of Sri Lanka, right? So we were going under review process. Now, in this, they looked at the technical compliance and also the effectiveness. Now, in their 40 recommendations level, I have updated it, right? Since 2015. In the 2015, there were 5 areas of compliance in Sri Lanka. Now it has come to 7. This is good news. That's why I said we are improving. Largely compliant, huge growth from 7 to 23 we have come. It's a long way which we have come. Then partially compliant, because you will see when it is largely compliant as it is going up, partial compliance will go down, right? So that's good. Non-compliant from 12 to 2. So whatever that was 12, it has gone up to partially compliance, and the non-compliant has come to 2. That's a good news. End of the day, that's what it matters, right? Before 2004, I remember even 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, this source of funds, and asking about questions, CDD, customer due diligence, KYC, know your customer, then KYC, know your customer. These were quite alien to the the local, not only to the general public, but as well as to the bankers as well. That's what I saw. But now it's not the case. Now overall, what do you call, deposits over 250,000. If it is done by a third party, you need to disclose who you are, whatnot, and everything. Even if it's you're depositing by a CDM or a cash deposit machine, you have to reveal what the source of funds are. These are requirements by the law, right? You have to do that. I will tell you why it is important in Sri Lanka insofar as our legal framework is concerned, right? So we call these 3 pillars the Convention on Suppression of Terrorist Financing, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and Financial Transfer Reporting Act, right? 3 pillars. It's on these 3 pillars that this is governed under, right? Can anyone tell me? The first 2 are, I would say, more or less the substantive laws, and the third one, FTRA, the Financial Transaction Reporting Act, is the procedural law which supports the 2 above. Can anyone tell me what's the difference between money laundering and terrorist financing? What is the difference? What's the difference between money laundering and terrorist financing? There is one difference. You can type it up. Difference between money laundering and terrorist financing. This was a question that was posed to me about, like I said at the beginning, 17 years ago. Anyone? Difference between money laundering and terrorist financing. You are in a position to answer that after 2019 incident on Easter Sunday attacks. you know, we have data to support that position. What do you think? Huilini?
I'm typing, sir.
Ah, good. Continue that. Others, Achala, where is that guy? Alpha. Yeah, he's also there.
Terrorist financing coming through the financial terrorist activities,
Mm-hmm.
and money laundering is coming under the criminal activities like smuggling, drugging, all the stuff.
Okay. This is a question like, what's the difference between bills of exchange and checks? Something like that. So, all all checks are bills of exchange, but not vice versa. Something like that. What is that one reason I'm asking?
The terrorism financing, money laundering, we used to place the money through after selling the assets.
Okay. Others, no
So-
idea. Bankers, only one is participating. Others, any thoughts on this? Remember this. Unlike now money laundering and terrorist financing, right? Financing of terrorism is an unlawful act under the Terrorist Financing Act, right? And for financing of terrorism, it need not be dirty money. It can be clean money, right? It can be clean, hard-earned money, maybe your salary. You may be using it to finance terrorism. But money laundering is not the case, right? So financing of terrorism, that's the only difference from money laundering insofar as that is concerned. It can be clean money. You saw that, I don't have to take, sir, but you can have a legal. Yes, very good. I saw that, Malindi. Right? No, we don't have to go to the international level, local level. You saw some of the suicide bombers, some of them were professionals, right? Not professionals in their own streams, engineers, so and so, that's what we saw in the news. So, they are professional income. They are 100% clean income, but used for financing of terrorism. That's the main difference. Keep that in mind. Convention on the Suppression of Terrorism Financing. This I remember in 2011. The whole day in CNN, BBC, they were showing this. Right? We can talk about this for many, many years to come as well. It's horrendous. 20 years have gone by, and people are still suffocating, and some are keeping this as an excuse and doing some unnecessary things as well. Involvement with any person connected to or acts linked to terrorism and terrorist financing. What is terrorism financing? Involvement. Just see how wide that definition is. Involvement with any person connected with any person connected to or acts linked or involvement in any acts linked to terrorism and terrorist financing. You provide them lodging, you are in terrorism financing. Funding for terrorist activities by legitimate or illegitimate. It need not be illegitimate only. right? Now, in local law, the definition of terrorism financing: any person who by any means, directly or indirectly, unlawfully and willfully provides or collects funds or property with the intention that such funds or property should be used, or in the knowledge that they are to be used, or having reason to believe that they are likely to be used in full or in part in order to commit. So look at this. It need not require that you want it to be used. It's even enough if you fund something, right? Provides or collects, you either you provide or you collect on behalf of them funds or property. Intention is one thing, or you know that it is being used. You don't have an intention, you only have the knowledge, right? You don't have any intention, you only have the knowledge. Even having the knowledge is sufficient. You so having, or having reason to believe. Maybe you don't have the knowledge, but knowledge is imputed in the circumstances, right? For an example, somebody goes and maybe a tenant. I'm just giving you a wild example, taking at the Easter Sunday attack, right? Unusual, exorbitant amount as lodging fees. He says, no, I only want to stay over for about 2-3 days, and you have a reason to believe, and he's a dodgy looking fellow looking at that, and there are certain things that you need to ask. He says, no, I can't give you my NIC details, just what do you ask? 10,000 rupees per day? Okay, I'll double it or I'll triple it. Don't ask any questions. Having reasons to believe. These are red flags, right? I remember back in the days when the war against LTT was going on, there were continuous advertisements in the TV with regard to don't talk to any strangers, don't take any strangers inside the house, don't provide them lodging, and always check the NIC, etc. And even they narrated things like, I still remember person coming in and asking for lodging, and the same example, and he doubles it and gives to the landlord, and the landlord with a sarcastic smile looking at the camera and says, "Hituwatat wada wedi ganak labuna." All will be caught up in that net for terrorism financing. And if you have, I'm just telling you in a practical note, if you not let alone have any intention, have any related link or reason to believe of even remotely for terrorism and terrorism financing, you are going for good, right? Once they caught under this net, right? Enormous powers going beyond the universal accepted human rights principles. It goes beyond on detention orders, right? And that's horrendous. So an act which constitutes an offense within the scope of or within the definition of any type of the treaties are provided in the Schedule 1, or any other act intended to cause death or serious bodily injury to civilians or to any other person not taking an active part in the hostility. So we are not talking about war, talking about any other part. A situation of armed conflict or otherwise, and the purpose of such act by its nature or context is to intimidate a population. Look at this. So they impute this. Otherwise, purpose of that act is to intimidate a population, to compel a government or an international organization to do or to abstain from doing any act or any terrorist act. So everything under the sun and the moon comes under this definition. So treaty is under this. We remember under Schedule 1 are these: the Convention on the Suppression of Unlawful Seizure of Aircraft in Hague, 1970. Suppression of unlawful acts against the safety of civil aviation in Montreal. Prevention and punishment of crimes against internationally protected persons, including diplomatic agents, 73. Convention Against the Taking of Hostages, 79. Convention on Physical Protection of Nuclear Material, Vienna. Suppression of unlawful acts of violence at airports serving international civil aviation, supplement to the Montreal Convention, which spoke about earlier. Then unlawful acts against the safety of maritime navigation. In Rome, 88, suppression of unlawful acts against the safety of fixed platforms located on the continental shelf, again in Rome. Then Convention for Suppression of Terrorist Bombings in 1997. Now, like I said, right, these have happened, these were there because these things actually happened, and then this FATF promulgated all these things, you know, they listed them down and wanted the member countries to have them incorporated in their local legislations, local laws. Right, so in this, there is no need to show that the funds or property provided or collected were actually used. So, in terrorist financing, you don't need to see the source of funds. Not required, not applicable. You look at where the funds are going. Where the funds are going. Right? Destination. So, involvement with any person connected to acts linked to terrorism is terrorism financing. Funding, etc., all this comes under that definition. Terrorist means we saw what a terrorist is. Is a person directly or indirectly and willfully commits or attempts to commit a terrorist act. It's not only that you have committed a terrorist act, even if you have attempted, you become a terrorist. Trastabadiya. That is, unfortunately, that is a term that sadly us Sri Lankans have to live with for the past 30 to 40 odd years, even after defeating the LTTEs, right? You know, those days, you know, it's very dark those days. You go out of the house without any assurance of returning, right? So many of us, you know, at the school also witnessed the bombings, and sometimes we were saved by the bell of bombings, right? The central bank bombings, the Maradana station bombings. You know, it's just a matter of minutes. You know, there is a story for all the people who were living at that time. Can say or relate to you know, all this instance of surviving all these things. For what purpose, right? Come to the definition and see. Participates as an accomplice. Accomplice is an assistance in committing a terrorist act. Organizes, directs or aids or abets the commission of a terrorist act, or contributes to the commission of a terrorist act by a group of persons acting with a common purpose, where the contribution is made intentionally and with the aim of furthering the terrorist act, or with the knowledge of the intention of the group to commit a terrorist act. Right? So it's quite serious. So we went through this. Just relate this and apply this to 2019 Easter Sunday attacks. Involve serious violence against not a person but majority, which is made for the purpose of advancing a political, religious or ideological purpose and such action. You know, I don't have to. You all are smart and wise people. How many of these categories would that constitute? Would that come under? Political, religious, or ideological purpose. Involve serious damage to the property. Tick. Involve serious violence against people. Tick. Advancing political, religious, or ideological purpose. Tick. endangers the life of another person, tick, other than the person committing the action. So, but this has gone to the next level, doesn't mind about his life. Creates a serious risk to health or safety of the public or section of the public, tick. Is designed seriously to interfere with or seriously to disrupt an electronic system. All these. So what can you do? There are freezing, extensions, and bona fide rights of third parties and forfeiture. Who can, for an example, you can't, wait until, you obtain an order of the court to arrest such a person? No. It was initially in 2006 by, the written authority of the superintendent of police, but it has come down, meaning it has tightened or made easier to apprehend suspected or terrorists. So ASP has the power under freezing power, but within 24 hours or 48 hours, I need to check on that. He has to report to court, high court of that particular area, and can extend that detention order for 7 days. You can go and straight away apprehend and arrest and detain under the Terrorism Act. Then after extension from the court, 3 months at a time, and for aggregate time of 2 years. Once you do that, notice should be published in all 3 languages. Support claims for legitimate business to continue. Appoint a receiver. That is on the proceeds of or whatever the funds per se, right? So forfeit property or its equivalent. So Rajasantaka karlete haki labena mudal all can be forfeited to the government. That's upon conviction. This is a very fierce, I wouldn't use the term weapon. This is a very fierce control over these activities. So, and power. So when there is a lot of power, there is a lot of responsibility comes within that, because in the hands of not so genuine people, this power can be misused to incarcerate innocent people as well. So when you have more power, more responsibility comes with that. I need to stress on that aspect as well. Then we come to PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, number 5 of 2006. And it was amended in 2011 by Act number 4, right? So there should be a crime for that. We call it a predicate offense, right? It's an unlawful act or a predicate offense. What is a predicate offense? Predicate offenses are provided in the act. And get money through crime and using the proceeds of the crime. That's basically is that. Person who commits an offense under the act whilst being a resident in Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan courts have jurisdiction. In institution used to commit offences, carries on business in Sri Lanka, whether incorporated or registered in Sri Lanka, or incorporated or registered as a branch of a bank incorporated or registered outside Sri Lanka. That's irrelevant. An act that commits what is considered an offence under this act committed in Sri Lanka. So applicability of the act is provided in section 2. Right, section 2. Right. We just applicability of the provisions of that is what it is. We just read it. Then offense of money laundering. Any person who engages directly or indirectly in any transactions. See, it could be directly or you could be indirectly engaging in a transaction in relation to any property derived from unlawful activity or proceeds from unlawful activity. So any property derived from that or proceeds derived from that. Even a land, if it is the case, it is. Receives, possesses, conceals. So it's an offense to receive it, have it with you, or if you conceal it, into or out of and invest in Sri Lanka any property derived or realized from any unlawful activity or any proceeds from any unlawful activity. Knowing or having reason to believe. Now, it was earlier, see, knowing or having, all the words from knowing or having reason to believe, and subjection and substitution therefore. Reason to believe, and this part was amended. Now it goes like this. Knowing or having reason to believe that such property is derived or realized directly or indirectly from any unlawful activity, right? Why am I stressing this much upon this? Is the bankers, you all as bankers and staff of financial institutions have a onerous, expressed responsibility to avoid these, right? What are these? From any unlawful activity or from the proceeds of any unlawful activity shall be guilty of offense of money laundering and shall on conviction after trial before High Court and can give an imprisonment up to 20 years. That's quite a long time, right? Then I come to, this is what we just discussed. So any transaction from any unlawful activity or proceeds. Now, what are these unlawful activities? Sri Lanka follows a list-based and threshold demarcated offences approach as opposed to all offences approach, right? We don't say all offences, we have a list. What is this list? This list is provided at the end. Unlawful activity means any act which constitutes an offence under the Poisons, Opium and Dangerous Drugs Ordinance. Any law or regulation for the time being in force related to the prevention and suppression of terrorism. So, you see, terrorism financing has a part to play in money laundering. The Bribery Act, ill-gotten money, Firearms Ordinance, Exchange Control. It's a predicate offence. So all these are predicate offences. An offence under Section 83C of the Banking Act. Any law for the time being in force related to transaction organized crime. Any law time being in force relating to cybercrime. Relating to offences against children. Force related to offences connected with the trafficking of persons. An offence under then this part. An offence under any other law for the time being in force which is punishable by death or with imprisonment for a term of 7 years or more. So, what are the other offences that is punishable by death? Punishable by death or imprisonment of a period not less than 7 years. Right? The Custom Ordinance, Excise Ordinance under the National Environment Act, these are coming from the amendment. Or an offence under any other law punishable by death or 7 years came down to 5 years or more by the amendment. And includes the penal code offences of criminal breach of trust. සාපරාධී විශ්වාසය කඩ කිරීම, සාපරාධී අපහරණය සහ වංචාව, cheating, attempts to aid and abet any of those, same sentence, right? So not only committing it, but even attempting to commit such offense comes under this list. So without giving, we try to give a exhaustive list, and at the end of the list, you call this clause the omnibus clause, Clapham omnibus clause, right? Omnibus, meaning all the, the omnibus in Clapham, this whole, the wording came out to being this in Clapham in London. There's these omnibuses where it goes quite slowly and anyone could get into that, right? Whilst walking and, can get into that, then you come to your drop-off position. It doesn't stop, then it slows, it anyway goes slow. Then you can get down. So when you say an omnibus clause, it is a clause which tries to take all other areas which it's contemplating into its net. So rather than specifying act by act specifically, it says any offense recognized in Sri Lanka. Initially it was 7, the punishment, now it has gone down to 5, which is punishable by death or punishable for 7 years for a term of 5 years or more, comes under the predicate offense of Money Laundering Act, Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Right? So if offense committed by a body of persons, the body corporate, every director or other officer firm, every partner, unincorporated body other than the firm members, and persons in management and control, all are responsible. Right? What are the possible defenses that you can use in money laundering if you are charged under money laundering? Let me tell you. 19. Where an offense under the act is committed by a body of persons, then if the body of person is a body corporate, director, officer of body corporate, firm, every part of that firm, unincorporated body or other firm. See, if this liability now relates to, let's say, we'll take a simple example, to a bank teller, accepts the cash and doesn't do his due diligence or KYC or whatever, and he was charged, right? He will be guilty of offense under this for aiding and abetting, provided that no such person be deemed to be guilty of an offense if he proves that the offense was committed without his knowledge or that he exercised all due diligence to prevent the commission of the offense. Now, there's a requirement that you need to do to prevent that. If you haven't done that, it will be deemed. Now, in normal law, the principle is you will be presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. Now, this, my dear students, it's the other way around. You will be presumed to be guilty unless you prove innocent, right? So it has a higher burden against the natural principles of principles of law related to innocence. And also, an offense under this act, which you saw the predicate offenses, you call it a cognizable offense within the meaning of Code of Criminal Procedure. Sinhala කියනවා සංඤ්ඤය වරද්දක් කියලා. Meaning, if it's a cognizable offense, it is such an act in the face of such an act, a police officer can arrest without a warrant. It's serious, right? Then the other clause I wanted to show you is this clause. I hope you are getting down your notations and references when we are going through this. Right. Divulging of information is an offense. Any person who knows or has reason to believe that an investigation into the commission of the offense of money laundering has been or is being or is about to be made, and who divulges, other than in the performance of his duties on this act, the fact or other information into such investigation to any court or to any other person, knowing that the investigation is like to be prejudiced thereby, or discloses other than in the performance of his duties under this act, the identity of the person against whom such investigation is being, or is about to be made, knowingly falsifies, conceals, destroys, or otherwise disposes of, or causes, or permits the falsification document or material which is or likely to be relevant to that investigation. So, take the local compliance officer, local anti-money laundering officer in your banks into this particular example. We'll take a simple example. And a teller, let's say there is a suspicious activity in the account, and the local compliance officer, the branch, reports this to the compliance department, anti-money laundering compliance department, and then they conduct an investigation. They look at the transaction, etc., and ask the only the relevant questions from the customer, conduct the due diligence KYC, and then still they think it's then they escalate it to the LCO, the local compliance officer. It's basically your head of compliance, and he or she thinks it's a suspicious activity of the account and reports it to the FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit, right? After that, when the customer comes again, visits the branch, and then the fact of this is maybe or may not be in the knowledge of the branch or the other person who reports this. So this is one way of reporting. The other way is the local compliance or the bank itself, without being receiving a report from the branch or anything, the compliance unit or whatever, they own their own systems and everything, generates unusual activities and forms their suspicions on unusual activities. And they may raise a report. We call it suspicious activity report, SARS. Now, after reporting it, let's say customer comes again to deposit some funds. You haven't received any response from the FIU. You have to report that within 48 hours. 48 hours from the date of forming the suspicion. Right, forming the suspicion. Now, customer comes to the branch. Any order of freezing the properties, we need to receive from the FIU and a court order. But customer comes to the branch, and then you say that, let's say the teller says, you see, Mr. Customer, you can't deposit. He asks, why you can't I deposit? Because we have raised a suspicious transaction report on your account. Therefore, there's an investigation on money laundering, possible money laundering activity in your account. Therefore, you can't do that. You do that, you are guilty of this offense of tipping off under the section 6 as amended. Now, it has increased the penalties for that. It was 6 months. You can be sent for rigorous imprisonment, බරපතල වැඩ සහිතව, for up to 1 year for doing that. Right. So be careful. Be careful. Just give me one moment. I need to get my charger and plug this thing in. Bear with me. So, like I said, when you are going through this, the suspect needs to show proof, or he has to prove that he is innocent. Otherwise, he will be treated as what you call not innocent, right? As guilty. So, duty to disclose to the FIU, direct officer or servant of an institution, failure to do so is what we just discussed. Balance of probabilities, you have to show that you did all your due diligence and you took all the necessary precautionary steps not to do something. Now it's not 50,000 or 6 months, it's 100,000 or 1 year, right? Freezing and forfeiture of assets can be done by ASP, it was SP earlier. Reasonable grounds to believe any person is involved in an activity relating to offense. Freeze for 7 days, with first 48 and then freeze for 7 days with the High Court order issued on the person or institution. If it's not done, for an example, if the FIU comes and tells you, gives you an order, freeze the account for 7 days until this is served. I'll show you that also. A police officer not below the rank of Section 7, rank of Superintendent of Police. Now this has changed in the 2011 Act, Amending Act. It's now an ASP. You don't have to go to an ASP. Or in the absence of such an officer, an ASP, where there are reasonable grounds to believe that any person is involved in any activity related to the offense of money laundering and is necessary for preventing further acts committed in relation to such offense. Issue an order. He can issue a freezing order prohibiting any transaction in relation to any account, property or investment which may have been used or intended to be used for this. It may be issued on the person who is believed to be, so on the account, basically on the customer's account or any other person. Freezing order should be confirmed by the High Court within a period of 7 days. Right, and it should be transmitted to the bank within 7 days. Should be transmitted to the bank, right? So be very careful. I've got instances where there were suspicious activity reports issued. One thing. Suspicious activity reports have been raised by the branch. It's gone to the compliance department. Sometimes there were instances where they have missed them, and there were instances court orders on orders from through the FIU has received to the bank, and it has gone to the correspondence department, and it has been missed from there, and no action, no freezing has been done on the account, because on an account level or customer level you have to place these restrictions in the system. If it's a freeze, it's no in, no out. But then again, funds coming in is not an issue. Funds going out is the concern. If you don't honor that on a timely basis, once that is received, you are guilty of the offense under this act. It's a huge thing. Then Financial Transactions Reporting Act. Basically, like I said, is the procedural part of it. That is on the role of FIU and the role of financial and other institutions in reporting such transaction. Initially, it was 500,000, and then it was 1 million on money laundering, offenses of money laundering, suspicious transactions on offenses, not suspicious transactions, all transactions on those. So has to be reported to FIU in the central bank. Now, under this finance, there's this term finance business. Under finance business, banks, finance companies, stockbrokers, insurance, all this comes under. And there's designated non-banking financial, designated non-finance business and professions. So lawyers, accountants, notaries, casinos, real estate dealers, dealers in precious metals comes under this. They have a duty, statutory obligation, right, to report of cash transactions above 1 million to FIU, right, and electronic funds transfer reports, and raise suspicious transaction reports, the case may be. Now, you remember I told you that Sri Lanka was under the grey list. That is mainly not due to the not due to the finance businesses. It was due to the designated non-finance businesses and professions. What they say was not enough monitoring is being done for this non-finance businesses. That's why we were under this grey list. We just discussed this potentially suspected activity. So once an STR, suspicious transaction report, is received, this is the operational aspect of it. They check the database to trace the existing financial risk. For example, FIU, they have links of the database coming from all banks, right? And then they have corroboration and collaboration with all other FIUs internationally, and they have a network. So they have a common database and all these reporting institutions. Example, in Sri Lanka, FIU, they have one bank, they have only one information about that bank transactions only, and then they report it to FIU. FIU will have a bigger network, many STRs coming from different banks. And then STR's database for previous suspicions reported. And if they want further information, they will write to the bank, we need more information on this. And then validate information from open sources as well, Google, this and that. But hardly it would be any of help, because these are done in disguise. All information collected, they will sit through the review committee, and then they will decide what action to be taken on that. Right? So under the FTRA, custom identification, KYC, CDD, the FIU issued rules and regulations on finance businesses and the designated non-finance businesses on this, what they need to be done. So the new rule is all financial institutions are governed under the CDD rules issued in 2016, right? Applicable to all finance institutions, all that engage in finance business. So banks, finance, leasing companies, all those comes under this. Record keeping, you have to keep the records of all these financial transactions. Reporting institutions to maintain the retained records for 6 years from the date of transactions, right? But if you made a report, you have to keep it eternally until that is done, until they advise you otherwise. So customer due diligence, conducting ongoing due diligence on the business relationship as through in your transactions throughout the course of that relationship. Always keep a consistent touch with the customer as to what the customer is doing, what his background is, how is, basically understanding and knowing your customer. And then risk profiling. What do you mean by risk profiling? Depending on the risk that they expose against these money laundering activities, you risk profile them, categorize them according to certain profiles. You get high risk customers, you get low risk customers. Low risk customers would be, your salaried employees. The activity what you usually find in his account is the salary on the 25th and his expenses on the 26th, and zero activity. Again, salary on the, just an example. Then high risk customers, cash prone businesses who deal mainly by cash. Those PEPs, politically exposed persons, politicians, of course, and high-ranking individuals in the government and the government sector, the high-ranking military officials. All those are high-risk customers, or SCC, special categories of clients. SCC, yeah. Where high scrutiny is required because of, not because they are labeled as money launderers, but they have a higher probability due to the nature of their powers and the exposure to engage in such activities. That's why you need higher due diligence for them. So every institution is required to appoint a compliance officer. You call an LCO, local compliance officer, who is responsible for ensuring institutional compliance with the requirement of the Act. There were instances where certain LCOs were asked to leave because of, because of instances where they have derelicted their duty, right? Because of that, there were instances. Yes, Quilin.
Also, as you said, if we 25th of salary, then he withdraw the salary fully. So if we consider that person as high risk customer, or transfer to another account?
No. Basically, it's, that's why one thing is, this is one reason why you can't fully automate this system, because your reasoning needs to come in, mainly for your risk profiling. That person would be a low risk customer. That doesn't mean he can't, or he won't. It's not a label that you give him that he won't engage in unlawful activity like terrorist financing. No. Example like this. Let's say a person is there, 150,000 salary every month coming in, and moment the salary comes in, 2 days later, all the loans are being deducted, and whatever that is left out. You see, when you look at the transaction list, you see what is lifestyle also. Like, the pharmacy, the cards are swiped here, and, cash withdrawals here and there, small amounts. And you come to a position when you become an expert in that area, you can even project whether, I'm just giving this as a glimpse, what type of a person that is. whether he's introvert, what type of a personality, education levels, whether he has family, kids, whether he has legal issues, divorce matters, all this you can have a profile of that person. So him, withdrawing the salary at any given point, let's say 150,000 salary, no loans, next day 150,000 withdrawn. Do you see that as a suspicious activity? I don't. Some people, they can't stand banking, what do you call, structure, the financial structure. They prefer to deal with cash. No matter what you say, they prefer to hold the cash and go and physically pay. Some people I know, they, irrespective of whatever the facilities that you have, they, to pay the water bill, they will go. Maybe they apply for half day leave, then they go to the water board and stay in the queue and pay that exact amount and come back. There are people like that. So, you have to look at the whole picture when you take that into consideration. That's what I'm, so insofar, from the bank's point of view, there is a limit that they can do. So what they have to show is maybe a person which they reported as a suspicious transaction is just a normal transaction. Maybe let's say that 150,000 salaried person getting a 10 million rupee cash deposit to the account. That doesn't make him a suspicious, what you call, a terrorist or a offender. And to the extent that he gives a justification to that, maybe it's a inheritance, sale of property or whatever. That could be the case, sale of a vehicle. These days, of course, 10 million, 20 million, that could be the case. So you cannot look at an isolated incident. Maybe there are instances, not instances, there are provisions that you could do. If you can't form a suspicion or an opinion on a particular activity by looking at a particular transaction and by looking at the history, you can place that account on watch for another further period, just to see whether things are going as per the the expected level of transaction of a person like that. All right.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So we just discussed this. Yeah.
And one more thing, sir, when we, not only myself, some other colleagues also having the same issue. When we answering the past papers, the answers are very lengthy, but when we are getting the notes, it's very short and sweet. So we are trying to find the notes and all. After that, we have prepared. Okay, we will read the first answers and questions. After that, we'll write the past papers. So how to find that legislations and all the things, the web's ordinance.
So this question, you asked two questions. What was the first one? Now I'll answer the second part of it. But there was what you said was in the
past papers, there's answer is very lengthy. Even the one full square paper is the answer, sir. So when we are trying to answer, but we used to go through what are the tudes. Because previous has given the much tudes, not like the ordinance, but he has given all the tudes. So, yes. But we have to read much more things to write to.
Correct. So this is the thing. This is a subject of law. Again, what you raised was a valid question. And insofar as banking law is concerned, it is a law. What we expect are answers with a legal sense in that, right? Not just practical examples only. the legality should be mentioned. Therefore, it automatically becomes lengthy. That is one reason why I don't use only, I use very rarely the PowerPoint presentations. I straight away address with the act. What you need to do is get that act. Insofar as what we discussed, I shared with you the numbers and the names of the acts. You can download all those acts now. It's available on internet. Go to, I'll give you two websites. In these two websites, you can download all these acts, which I just mentioned. Download it together with if there is amendments like we discussed, and you go through the sections with it. If your answers are specific, the examiner would be expecting the specific answers, right? Not lengthy, unnecessary wordings. If it is confined to that, yes, if you provide examples, it would color your answer, but stick to the law. That's why I always go with the act or the particular ordinance, which is what is important more than the PowerPoint presentation. You're looking at the PowerPoint presentation, you can just go, but if you state with the section wise, the examiner will know that you have the knowledge of it.
We also given the act also, but we don't know how to find those things. Because those days it was the quarantine, we are not able to buy the books, and he has given books also. But that's why I raised the question, sir. Thank you anyway.
So with these two websites, you can download. You don't have to buy them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So tipping off the customer, section 9, already discussed. Now this section 12 of FTRA, no civil, this is a immunity. Muktiyak laba denawa, nirmuktiyak laba denawa. No civil, criminal or disciplinary proceeding lie against any person or institution reporting STRs under the FTRA in good faith or in compliance with the regulations made under the Act or rules of directions under the FIU. So this is a direct overriding immunity over section 77 of the Banking Act, which is secrecy. You are disclosing data, no? Secrecy. So you're overriding that section 77 by section 12 of the FTRA. But all these things needs to be there. Right? So these are the non-compliance provisions. And this is again, I just, shared with you. FIU have the links with all these institutions, the regulatory arms, the CSC, SEC, Insurance Board, Bank Supervision, Exchange Control, all that. Then law enforcement, so police, the CID, FCID, FIB, that is Fraud Investigation Bureau, narcotics, terrorist investigation, State Intelligence Service, SIS. Then Attorney General's Department for Prosecution, all other government departments, because all these are required. Why? In the event if there is a imminent suspicion of a maybe a terrorism activity or maybe a money laundering activity, and the FIU officials apprehend such a situation, and if it's of utmost urgent in terms of time, they have to notify all these institutions, especially the immigration and immigration. They can send notices, stop this, and before them, evading arrest and getting the police enforcement to arrest these people, then reporting institutions, the banks. So they are linked with all these matters. So if the banks doesn't follow, there were in the history, and there will be, of course, in the future as well, for not having sufficient acceptable levels of precautionary and mitigatory measurements. There were fines globally as well. Deutsche Bank Citigroup, you can sue in HSBC as well. Been subject to so many penalties over money laundering claims. Willfully failing to file suspicious activity reports, or failing to monitor reports, etc. Right. Any questions? We have come to the end of the lecture. If you have any questions, you can just raise them. No questions. Like I said, this is an important area. Keep these things in mind. In the for the exam. All right. Okay, if there are no questions, we can call it a day. Next week, I think most probably we'll have, next day would be our final day for lectures. Let's see. Have a nice evening.